Right. Hello and welcome to our second Logic Apps Live. And I'm joined here with your other hosts, Kent and Wagner, and our product team. I'll let them introduce themselves briefly. And
So
oh,
who gonna start?
yeah, I'll start with myself. So hi, my name is Zúñiga. For anyone who doesn't know me, we've got joined here with my product team, and I'm a PM focused on our new data mapper feature, the DevOps developer experience, and this community outreach program. We're also joined with Divya. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Divya, product manager on Logic Apps team. I primarily look at connectors and industry verticals and excited to be here.
Great, thanks, Divya. We're also joined with Harold.
Hi everyone, this is Harold. I'm a product manager as well in the team, focused on legacy integration technologies. I'm very happy to be here as well. Thank you.
And we're also joined with our other host, Kent.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Kent Weare. I'm a PM on the team as well and focused on enterprise integration, our custom code investments, and some of our observability tracking and monitoring features.
And Parth, our other PM.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Parth. I've been with Logic Apps for a couple of years. I'm a PM, and I work with the designer and some data analysis as well as tasks. Looking forward to hearing from you today.
And lastly, we also have Wagner, our other host.
Hey everyone. So Wagner Silveira. I'm a program manager with the Logic Apps team, looking at local development and development tools, DevOps, and also community outreach. So really good to see you again on the second month in a row.
And we also have Slava Kultovic, who's not in right now, but he is our principal PM. And with that, we'll just kind of head into the agenda to see what we've got in store for us today. Our start is with Kent in our Under the Hood with an interview for our engineer for an inside look. We've also followed by Harold, who'll be talking with us about the IBM host file built-in connector. And Parth will be chatting with us about updates for Logic Apps Designer. And last but not least, we also have Divya chatting with us about Connectors 101, followed by a little bit of time left for some Q&A. So with that, we'll start with our first one with Kent.
Yeah, and so in the spirit of community, we thought it would be a good opportunity to expand our community and introduce you to some of our engineering folks. And so, where you've got a plane and the plane is taking people around, much like that, we want to open up the hood and show how we go ahead and make some of these products as well. And so this is a new segment that we're going to experiment with, and just interested in feedback as we go through this, and if you'd like to see more segments like this. Today, we're going to talk with Nikhil Sira. He's a software engineer, and he was the engineer behind the recent Application Insights V2, which is in public preview. So we can jump to the next slide and kick off the interview here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again on this Logic Apps Live episode. My name is Kent Weare. I'm a PM on the Azure Logic Apps team, and today we've got a special guest from engineering. Nikhil, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Kent. I'm Nikhil Sira. I'm a software engineer in the Azure Logic Apps team. I've been primarily working on the enhancements for application insights on Logic Apps Standard, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nikhil, for joining us. We're doing a little bit of an experiment here on Logic Apps Live today. We thought it would be an interesting concept to bring some of our engineers into the community itself and give you folks insights into what goes into making the product itself. And so Nikhil has volunteered to participate in this segment. We're calling it Under the Hood as an homage to BizTalk Hot Rod. For some of you long-term BizTalkers, I'm sure you're all familiar with BizTalk Hot Rod and that production that we used to see and look forward to every month when it came out. So what we're talking about today is application insights enhancements. As Nikhil had mentioned, this was a feature that I was able to work with him on. And so we wanted to get some deeper perspectives from him on this particular feature. And so if you haven't seen it, we do have a blog post. We'll go ahead and copy and paste this link into the chat. a blog post that describes the benefits. There's also another video as well that's part of this as well that you can go ahead and check out. Now, if you think about some of the benefits that are available in this public preview release, we did improve the consistency of names and IDs being used across the different events and tables. We did go ahead and put more emphasis on the request table. And so by doing so, this should allow you to avoid redundant data by having to use both trace and request in order to like paint the full picture together. And this more specifically relates some tracking IDs, where you're going to find those exclusively now in the request table, and you don't necessarily need to rely on trace for those events. And so this should help with the verbosity and ultimately being able to allow you to reduce your storage costs, which was a fairly consistent perspective that we got from customers as we were working through this. The workflow start and end records you'll now see in the traces table, and batch events are now emitted to this table as well. Once again, we've included some consistency around IDs, names, resource, and correlation details. So it's very consistent across those. And even if you need to join those tables for some reason, you should be able to use these IDs in a very consistent manner in order to go ahead and connect those tables together. Exceptions is something that we spent some time on. We wanted to make them more descriptive, and we're now capturing the exceptions for action and trigger failures as well. A couple other areas that we did invest in was filtering at source. And so this is another lever that we do want to provide customers that will allow you to control what events are emitted. And this should help you reduce your costs as well. And so, for example, if you're just interested in triggers or just interested in actions or workflows, you can have control over that. And then also being able to filter out non-workflow related events, because this is another area where folks are like, I'm not really interested in some of this other platform stuff that's going on. Just let me focus on workflows. And that's an area where we've spent some time as well. Last but not least, metrics, improve consistency and filtering capabilities as well. So now when we have our metrics available in the Logic App standard itself, those are the same metrics that you're going to go ahead and see inside of Application Insights as well. So go ahead and check this feature out and give us your feedback. But now let's try to get some perspectives from Nikhil and his experience working with this particular feature. So Nikhil, the first question I have for you is, when you first found out you're going to be working on this feature, what were some of your initial thoughts?
So when I first was introduced to this feature, so Logic Apps already was integrated with App Insights, and I felt App Insights was already a powerful tool to monitor Logic App executions. And we had a lot of customer usage as well, and we had a lot of fans of the product already, and we had a lot of customer feedback. We saw scope for improvements in the observability experience, make sure that like the data that we emit is more user friendly, and there were a lot of customer driven features that we've added in the enhancements. So I was really excited to work on a high impact feature, and and this was one of my first projects. So this is like really been a good experience for me so far. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and it is true. We did get we had multiple sources of customer feedback. So we did have like our customer support tickets. Then we also did have our private preview, and we got some rich feedback. So I totally agree with all of that. Now, we went through a big laundry list of enhancements or investments that we made in this version. Was there one of those features being complex to implement, and if that's so, like, how did you sort of work around that, or how did you sort of solve that problem?
Oh yeah, so the customer feedback pushed us to make improvements in not just one table, but across all the tables in Application Insights, like not just the requests, but the traces, the exceptions, and the dependency. One of the complexities was to model the schemas for all of them, the way that we emit the custom dimensions in each of them, and to make sure that the data is consistent across all tables. Like to make sure, like for example, if an action fails, like it would log an entry in the exception table, but we have the link from the exception table to the operation parent ID to the ID of the request entry that shows the action execution. So and the same goes for the dependencies and the traces. So all four tables are like linked through like one operation ID, and they all have the same set of schemas to make sure that it's consistent. Like we have the resource details, we have the correlation details. So making the data consistent across all the tables was one of the complexities involved. But once we had that, it was like it addressed a lot of customer feedback. Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I could see that. I remember going through that, and I think you did a great job with that because it is really nice. It is very easy to link events, whether it's dependencies, whether it's exceptions, whether it's trace, whether it's requests. Like it's a very, I would call it canonical model in many regards, as some of those nodes are. And so, like once you're familiar with one table, it's pretty easy to understand how to connect it to other tables as well. Now, what sort of learnings did you get out of our engagement with our private preview customers? Was there anything that stood out from that perspective?
Oh yeah. So the private preview pushed us to add a lot of features. Like for example, like the connector type. Now that that we've added, so every entry in the request, like representing a trigger or an action, now shows like the type of connector it is, and if it's making like an external API or a service provider call. So it has an API name which will represent, for example, if it's a service bus or if it's an Outlook 365 connector. So, and this even pushed us to add more categories to the events. So that would help reduce the noise and give more filtering capabilities to the customer. So one of that was like by adding categories to all the types of events that we emit. Like for example, if it's an action, it would have the category workflow.operations.action. And if it's like, for example, like a trigger, like it would have workflow.operations.trigger. And the traces that we emit, the table that caused the most verbosity, have now predefined categories for each type of event that we emit. So that would help uh, filter events out of that. And yeah, so that was another thing that we added to the based on the feedback that we got from the private preview. So and yeah, so it helped us push and add more events. And yeah, looking forward to. And apart from this, we had a lot of positive feedback that was encouraging as well. So yeah, like hopefully the public preview gives us more feedback and we'll address those as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a trip down memory lane. I recall like all those conversations that we had when we were going through the feedback and prioritizing it. I think for customers like considering like using this new schema, you know, there's a lot of things that you mentioned are worth the price of admission itself. Well, in this case, like there's no additional charges, so there's not really admission. But like I think the connector details is something like every customer should actually be implementing. And I'm like still waiting for someone that shows their dashboard that shows all of the connectors that are in use for a specific, say, subscription or your specific workflows. Like that's a great way to say, hey, like what are the connectors that's used the most? I think there's lots of opportunities when you think about like say planned maintenance where someone goes, oh, like SAP has planned maintenance because they're doing an upgrade or some sort of service pack or whatever. And then there's always the question of like, oh, well, what workflows use the SAP connector? This is that opportunity for you to go ahead and to just write a query that says like, show me all of the workflows for the last 30 days that have used the SAP connector distinct, and boom, there's your list and you know exactly how to operate. So I think that was a tremendous feature as well, something I enjoy. And I like the category answer as well. That's another important thing. We were very consciously invested in categories because we knew that's going to give you the ability to filter as a customer, so filtering events as well. The what was your favorite feature, like as you went through building out this new functionality?
Yeah, so one of my favorite features is like adding making the request details more meaningful, like and adding exceptions related to it. Like previously, we had like key events in the traces tables, which was like more verbose. and the request tables would have the entries for actions and trigger execution, but would not have the key information. So now one of my favorite features, like having the track properties, the retry history, the resource details, and the correlation details all linked to that particular action, having that entry in the request table. So that is like, I feel like it has high impact, and it's based on customer feedback as well, like having the track properties in the request entry. So that is one of my, like, I feel like it was a lot of customer driven. So that's where I'm happy to have addressed that. So that's one of my favorite features.
Oh, cool. I was sure you were going to say dependencies, but no, it's all good. You always seem to, I don't know, you always seem pretty excited about working on the dependencies capability too, which is pretty cool. But no, that's cool.
Yeah. The dependencies like are linked to the retry history. Like every retry, like for example, if you make an HTTP action, it has like, if it has multiple retries, we will see the number of retries in the dependency entry as well. So the correlation between them, it's like it's what I'm happy about. Yeah,
it's quite powerful. Yeah.
Oh,
okay. So last question before we wrap up here. So we're now in public preview, but is there any particular areas of the product that you'd like to see some additional feedback on? Is there a call to action for our community here to give us some feedback about any particular features, do you think?
So it's mostly related to the experience the customer has using this feature, like how easy it is for them to transition from V1 to V2. And I'm hoping that we receive positive feedback, and apart from this, I'm like also curious to know if they want more, if customers want more filtering at source, like for example, if they want to see some workflows, some particular workflows in the particular app that they want to filter on. So that's something that I'm curious to know. And it's mostly like, and I'm also curious to know if there are any more help customers need in terms of transitioning to V2, like in terms of having dashboards or like predefined like queries. So that's something that I'm curious to know as well. So that's pretty much that I want to know.
Those are some good items. I'm definitely interested in the filtering as well. If there's more granularity that we can provide there that would help customers reduce their costs even further, that's top of mind for us. So do let us know about that. And that's another interesting perspective is like through the use of Azure Monitor workbooks, Application Insight is one of those sources. And so maybe we need to have a contest. And maybe that's something for us to take away, have a contest who can start to put out some of these workbooks using the new schema. But we'll see what we can do on that front. So thanks, Nikhil, for being a good sport and for jumping on the call. And folks on the call, if you would like to see more of this type of interactions with our engineers, do let us know in the comments. And we'll do our best to bring some more engineers into the community and share their perspectives.
Yeah, I'm happy to do this as well. Yeah, thanks for bringing me into this.
Awesome. All right, thanks everyone.
Okay, so before we move on, there was like a couple of questions during the session. Kent, do you wanted to take some of those? I know there is this one from Nikolai that is right now on the stream. There is no issues about public review that people should be aware?
Yeah, and I'm going to assume this is related to the App Insights public preview. And so there's no known issues at this point in time. So this is just, if people are running into something, do let us know, and we'd be happy to take a closer look. But at this point, we do have other customers using it. We're anxious to get additional feedback as well. And we've had, customers using this in private preview as well. So it's a fairly low risk activity. It doesn't interfere with your message processing. But certainly, if you do run into something, do let us know.
Cool. And the other one, very quickly, is do we know when it's going to GA?
So So we talked about this in like last month's video. So we did introduce the diagnostic settings in Logic App Standard, which does allow you to publish telemetry to Log Analytics if you wish. And so this is currently in public preview. We don't have a GA date just or like established just yet, but I don't anticipating it being too far down the road. We just want to let it, bake and settle a little bit, and then we'll look to promote it to general availability. But we'll definitely update you all in future webcasts as we get closer to that date.
Okay. And back to you, Alex, for our next one. I just needed to find out how to pass the...
Hello,
Yeah, no
everyone.
worries.
There we go.
Thank you to Kent and Nikhil for that, and I'll pass it off to Harold to chat with us a bit about the IBM.
Thank you, Alex and Wagner. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So I'll get started. This is about so we'll talk about the IBM host file built-in connector. During the last 30 years, we've had a product called Host Integration Server that is our middleware for integrating against data programs and messaging systems on IBM host systems and mid-ranges, like AS400 systems. So we have included some of the we've been working on include some of the capabilities from this server product into our Logic Apps connectors to be able to connect to this type of legacy systems. The IBM host file standard connector is a thin wraparound a host integration server feature called flat file parser. So this is an offline connector. As such, it requires the data, the binary files, to come from any trigger or action that produces binary data, FTP, blob storage action, for instance. We recommend this particular connector for enterprise application integration scenarios, in mainframe migrations, complete or partial, in legacy data migrations that don't require permanent connection to an IBM host system, and in data wrangling or scenarios that require improving or transforming legacy data. If you see this diagram, you have that there is an IBM mainframe on the left side, and on the right side you have the Logic app running with the host file built-in connector. So if you see the IBM host file, it currently has two actions: the parse host file contents and the generate host file contents. The way how it works is that it will read the information, the parse host file contents. It will read information from a place like a storage account. It will parse it, right, and then you will have it available, and you can do anything with it, right? Once, if you were to do data wrangling, so then you can take the data back to the original file or to a new file by using the generate host file contents action that will basically include and generate a copy of the original file, and then you can place it in an FTP location, and then it can go back to the mainframe. Do you want to go next to the next slide, Wagner, please? So there is the support files are any binary fixed length data set, for instance, fixed length relative record data sets. And the prerequisites are to have an Azure subscription, an account, and an installation of Host Integration Server to create what we call a Host Integration Designer XML file definition that creates the necessary metadata for the host file. So the host file has a structure, and this structure is what you need to understand it first, right? So this offline parser will require you to understand the structure of the file ahead of the setup of it, right? Do you want to go next, Wagner? Now, there are cases where you will need a direct connection to the actual file. So there are two scenarios, right? One scenario which is the offline that we just covered, and there is the other scenario where you have to have access to the file, and you need direct access. So if direct connectivity is required to the host from Azure, so then an alternate approach will be to leverage the Host Integration Server managed host file provider running on a virtual machine with Host Integration Server. So in other words, you will have to set up a Host Integration Server on a VM that has 100% of the capabilities that we have in the server product that come on premises close to mainframes too. because the managed host file provider operates in most ways as a normal data provider. You can connect to any host file system, execute commands, and retrieve the data. It supports sequential access method datasets, virtual storage access method datasets or vSAN files, basic partition access method datasets. And the diagram that you have on the right side, you will see that in the cloud, you have a host integration server running on a VM with the managed host file provider. And then you see that the mainframe is on premises, right? So if you were to integrate to the mainframe that is on premises, you will likely be using an express route circuit. And in this express route circuit, you will have to enable TCP/IP specific ports 12,000 to 12,004 because they are required by the IBM Enterprise Extender that is set up on the mainframe to support SNA APPC over LU 6.2. This means that if you enable the right connectivity between the VM that has host integration server and the mainframe, so then you can have direct access to the vSAN files or to the SAM files or to basic partition access method data sets. Wagner, would you like to go next and hit the video? So in this quick demo, thank you. What we will see is we are connecting to our mainframe using our 3270 client. So we authenticate against the client, and then what we are going to show you is how is it that we can create a file. So in this case, I have a particular binary file in the mainframe. We will access the file, and then we will be able to parse it by using the host files connector. So if you see, I have a dataset called hcampos.new.dataset. If I browse this dataset, I see that I have two records, Don Johnson and Tom Taylor, right? So it follows on a structure that I have available, and I have to mimic using Visual Studio to replicate that structure. Now, what I'm doing, though, is that given that the file is available, I am FTPing to the mainframe. And once I get connected to the mainframe, so of course I authenticate, right? What I do is I get the file in a binary mode, and then you'll see that this file will be, in this case, I'm moving it to my workstation, right? So then once I have the file, because it was downloaded, then that is the file, right? So what I'll do is I'll show you what is the structure of the file. So this structure is what we call the host integration definition file that comes when I go to Visual Studio and I create a host file project, right? So then it will give me the possibility to create the definition of all of the records that belong to that particular file, right? So you see customer name, SSN, street, access pin, and so on, so right. Then if you have once you have the file, so in this particular case, what I'm doing is I am moving the file to a blob. So you see I have this fairly simple workflow that has an activity, a task, an action, right? A trigger that is capturing from a blob, reading from a blob file this file. So then once I have the file, so then I'm able to operate it, right? And it's send it to the host file connector to read the content, parse it, and then post the message into a Teams channel. So we'll see that HIDX file or customers file definition for the file that I created has to be stored in the maps under the Logic App configuration. And then once I upload the blob, then you will see that the workflow will be kicked off, and then it will be parsed once it's being executed. So okay, let's see. Yeah, the workflow. Yep. Then we have the workflow, and if you see, it has executed successfully, and let's see what's in it, right? So then you see the information is coming from the file, the metadata of the data set, right? And then you will see in the parse host file contents that the content has been parsed. So then after that particular action, you can manipulate the file, and then you can do anything with it, right? So you have the file, you can extend it, you can augment it, right? And then you can use it in any other scenario. So to the questions, to Sandro's question, that means that we still need to have host integration server on a VM. If you do need direct access, yes, you need to have host integration server on a VM. So you have to, because in that way you will have the full capabilities and direct connectivity, and you will have to set up SNA over APPC connectivity, TCP/IP basically, right, for the mainframe. And yes, if you need direct access, you will need a vStock server license, a standard license at least. But if you don't need to have direct connection, so then you will not require a server license. Now, all of the features that we are including in our connectors that are coming from host integration server, they do not require a license if you are using them through our connectors. And we have a number of connectors available today, like MQ 3270, DB2. We are working on CICS, IMS DB, and IMSDC, and soon IMSDB as well. And that finishes my part.
All right, thank you, Harold, for that introduction. And then I will pass this off to Parth to give us some updates about the designer's public preview.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. So before we jump into just the features that we've added for public preview and the timelines and the demos, I just wanted to revisit why we kind of went to completely reshape the designer, right? So it is in public preview for Logic App Standard right now, and we're planning for GA in build. So talking about why we did it, when we talk about the engine, we consistently heard complaints on the slowness of the designer, from the initial load time to adding actions and then more, right? The more impacted were customers with workflows with greater than 50 actions, which is the enterprise heavy workloads, where designer would eventually hang, locking up your environment. So it wasn't quite fun for the developer to be like, okay, I have 50 connections, 60 connections with hundreds of dynamic values, and then there needs to be a re-render every single time that would happen behind the scenes to fetch the data from the API call from the action operation, right? So it makes me come to my first point, which is faster re-rendering of components. We wanted to make the designer resilient and more performant to handle such workflows. That's why we worked on faster re-rendering by moving to the state of the workflow to a Redux store, which allows you to only cause re-renders on new changes, not for every single action that is added in your workflow. It was quite old, right? This was based on React that was 6 or 7 years old. So we had to make sure that we revamp all of it, and we rewrote pretty much everything, from definition, serial parser, and components, everything. And it's available for you to see, right? That's the best part. It's open source. We wanted to make it more predictable and transparent for customers to know the features we're working on and the code base we use. And that's why we moved to open source. So please do feel free to use the new designer, file the bugs or improvements you think through the menu bar when you're in the designer, so that you can also track the progress of it when it's being resolved. So in the issues of this GitHub page, you can see all the things that we're working on currently before we go GA by build. Coming to the third point, which is the improved search and browse experience. So as the platform continues to add more connectors, which they will talk about in the next slides, we wanted to evolve the low-code experience to capture exactly what the user wanted to build the app for, right? For example, with the previous designer, we observed that new and experienced users struggled to find the right actions needed, as they consistently had to change tabs. There were 5 in consumption, then 2 in standard. But in this, we're just leveraging other design measures like labels and removing tabs to be able to help you find the connectors and actions exactly that you need, right? So that's one improvement. And you'll see a lot of richer canvas, which I think would be great to move to the next slide if we can, which will help you provide the look and feel of the new designer. And if you can play this, thank you. So in the order processing API, I wanted to be able to navigate away to any part of the workflow. So now we have the minimap to do that, which is also would be there, I believe, in the data mapper feature ahead. But I think you also wanted to see like how seamlessly and fast you can navigate to the components, like actions, and just go away from one to other, and set, like any particular values. So it's just less laggy, and you have this better feel and look that you would need as a developer, right? To be able to just build your workflows faster. If we go to the next slide. So there's another one next. Yeah. So this is the actual comparison of the old and the new designer side by side. So you can see like we're navigating away to the old designer on the left, and the right is the new designer. And it's a heavy workflow. Like this is, I would at least say more than 50 actions. And you can see like as it is taking for the old designer to still load up, the new designer is already ready, and you're able to configure the run after. You're able to see the settings, whatever you pretty much want to. So I think this is the power of the new designer. I wanted to kind of portray this so we all get to understand what are we trying to achieve through this. So as I said, it's quite a heavy workflow. So there was that. If we move to the next slide, please, I can talk a little bit about the roadmap ahead. Would be great. Thank you. So right now, as I said, for GA, we're targeting Logic App Standard, and we're also reworking the whole new token picker and expression editor experience. It is very annoying to use the token picker experience and expression editor today, especially to summon the dropdown and to be able to manipulate the data in a super tiny space. We wanted to make it fast and clean for you to be able to add the dynamic content from your previous actions and have an intuitive experience to tamper with that content, right? So that's why we're making this whole new token picker experience so it's easy for you to just pick whatever content you want to take from the action and insert it in any other actions you want to. So you'll see that in the GA as well. And the experience changes, we're also having more of them in search and browse. We want to plan for fuzzy search, just to better search for actions, which means want to go for better comparisons between similar services. So if you have, let's say multiple databases and you're trying to achieve one goal, like which one should you use? And most importantly, to continue to improve our performance as well, right? As we go post-GA, we're trying to achieve this designer parity for consumption and Visual Studio. Right now, this is only available in standard. This will also answer Sandra's question. We're planning to GA the designer in consumption and VS Code after we GA the designer for Logic App Standard. I think we'll be estimating at least about a month or two in that time frame to bring that parity, Sandra, answering your question. And I think one more thing I wanted to touch base on, which was the go-to action feature, which is also something that we thought would be interesting to hear your feedback on. We've heard multiple times that, in workflows that are with a lot of actions, how are we able to just like re-navigate away to like one action that we want to see, right? Like I'm on action number 51, but I want to go back to the first trigger and be able to like, make some changes to the HTTP call, right? So if we move to the next slide, we'll see a small video, which is also a feature that we're trying to add post-GA. In this, you're having a lot of actions. So what would happen is there'll be a way to summon this go-to action experience. Right now, it's just Command P, but we want to make sure it's on the command bar over here on the top. And you can search for any action that you want to go to, right? This kind of gives you more freedom to also like rename your actions. Right now, like you're renaming the actions, but like it's just for the visual experience. Now we can also search through them, right? Through this experience. So would love to hear what you think of this. We'll also have like further hierarchies. So if it's within a scope or a condition, we'll be able to show that as well in this go-to action. But it's a very, just a prototype, and we'd love to hear some feedback if there's anything here. So what are the few problems that you encounter, right, when you're working in the designer? Please let us know so we can prioritize our work streams accordingly. And please let us know if there's any other feedback or comment you have. But that's all I have from my end. Thank you.
Thank you, Parth, for that update on our new designer. And then lastly, I will pass this off to Divya to chat with us a bit about our connectors.
Thank you, Alex. So yeah, I think next few slides we'll talk about connectors. And if you're wondering like why connectors one-on-one after so many years of having this product out, connectors out, I think this is important now because up until now we had consumption SKU that was predominantly used by customers, but we now have Logic App Standard that is also being considered being used by our customers for their mission critical scenarios. And with consumption SKU, the connector model, the connector hosting model between built-in and all the other connectors models that we have was same. So it was not a lot of question or decision making on customer with which connector to choose under which circumstances. But that's not the case with Logic App Standard. And therefore, I feel like we should do some level setting here, and we should at least share with you why we have these different models and what is our recommendation in terms of choosing these connectors for various workloads and scenarios. So I want to start first with the terminology. On the left, I have a screenshot of our GA designer, and on the right is the preview designer. What we have here is a built-in connector, which is also being referred to as the in-app in because it runs within the same runtime. And then we have the second model, which is referred to as Azure on the left side and also referred to as shared on the right side. So to begin with, as Parth was saying before, like we love to get your feedback on not just product capabilities, but experiences as well as labels, naming, anything. So give us feedback on whether in-app shared makes more sense compared to built-in in Azure. For the context of this discussion, built-in and in-app are same things. Likewise, Azure shared, or often you would have heard managed connectors. They all basically refer to the same connector components. Can you move to the next slide, please? All right. So before we go into more details and do the comparisons, I just want to give a quick overview, a very high level overview of how these connectors are different in terms of their architecture. So this is all in the context of Logic App Standard. And as you all know, with Logic App Standard, as a customer, you bring in your own compute and storage. So Logic App Standard runs or is hosted on App Service Plan, which you bring in either via Workflow Standard Plan or an ACE v3 plan. As a customer, you also bring in the underlying data storage, which is used by Logic Apps to read and write data as part of processing your transactions. Now, the key thing to note here is that built-in connectors or the in-app connectors, they run side by side with the Logic App itself, with the Logic App runtime. Now, as you can see, all of this is running on the same compute, and therefore there is close proximity between the runtime and the connectors here, which in turn results in better performance, lower latency for these connectors. Secondly, Logic App Standard supports VNet integration. You can do VNet integration for Logic App Standard on the app itself. And since the connector runs in the same app, the connector also naturally gets VNet connected, which means that if you need to reach out, if you need to connect to applications that are in the same VNet, you essentially do not have to do much there. You can you do not need any additional components to reach out to your applications or components within the same VNet. So I think this is the biggest advantage of using built-in connectors, especially in hybrid scenarios where you are trying to reach to applications within the same VNet. You get all of that automatically. And then the second key component is that your connector runs side by side with the Logic app. Can we go to the next diagram here? Compared to built-in, now let's look at the managed connectors. So if you were to use a managed connector from Logic App Standard, you would be calling the managed connector infrastructure. All the managed connectors are being hosted on the connector infrastructure that is hosted in Azure and is owned by Microsoft. What that means is that in order to call any service or application through a managed connector, you're basically leaving the boundaries of your VNet. You're basically leaving your application boundaries itself also, even if you're not using a VNet. And you are basically going to an additional hop, which is the connector infrastructure hop shown in the diagram here. If you were to connect to an application that is on-prem in a VNet, then you would need an additional component. You can still do it with a managed connector, but you would need an additional component, which is the on-prem data gateway. And via that, you would reach out to your application. So as you can see, comparing the left to the right, if you had a similar scenario where you were trying to reach to applications in a VNet, you would be going through at least two more hops, the connector infrastructure hop and the on-prem data gateway. If you were to connect to any other application, you would still be going through the connector infrastructure. As you can note here, that it is shared, which means that it's a multi-tenant environment. So along with your workloads, the same infrastructure is being used to run workloads from other customers too. So naturally, there could be noisy neighbor problems here, due to which this is the infrastructure where you will see some limits as well in terms of what you can do, how much performance and throughput you can get out of this model. So hopefully this clarifies on the underlying architecture and how the code runs at different places when you choose a built-in versus a managed connector, and the implication of that in terms of the proximity of the code to the logic app runtime, the calls that you have to make, number of calls going out from the VNet to internet, as well as the multiple hops that are required on the right side on the managed connectors. Can we jump to the next slide, please? So now, with this in mind, if you have to choose between a built-in and a managed connector, here are the differences that one need to consider. So the first one, as I mentioned in the architecture, is that built-in connectors are running on customers' infrastructure, which is a single tenant environment. You are not sharing that infra with anybody else. Whereas in case of managed connectors, it's a multi-tenant environment. You are sharing that infrastructure with other customers. What that means is that you have a lot more control on the configuration and performance characteristics of your application in case of built-in scenarios. You can choose the compute configuration based on the type of workloads. For a CPU intensive workload, you would probably choose different configuration compared to a memory intensive workload. So you have a lot more control in case of built-in connectors, given that you own the underlying infrastructure. Next one, please. Because you have, it's all your infrastructure. Also have and Logic Apps supports VNet integration in Logic App standard. You basically get direct VNet integration in this case. So when you have scenarios around hybrid integration, you do not have to worry about doing a lot of extra work to reach out to those on-prem components. Extra work, extra components, which is the case in case of managed connectors, because in case of managed connectors, you do need to use on-prem data gateway, which is hosted on another VM and comes with its own limitations in terms of throughput, in terms of payload that it supports, etc. Next point, please. And because of these reasons, because of the fact that it is your infrastructure, your compute, we do not have to impose any throttling on the connection. So the only limitation that would come here would come from the downstream service that you are trying to connect to. If you are connecting to a SQL or SAP, whatever limitations they may have from their end would be the key thing that you need to consider. and you do have to design your applications such that you are not overflowing those applications. But from connection point of view, from logic apps point of view, we do not impose that limitation in case of built-in connectors. That's not the case with managed connectors. For those who have used them, you have seen that on API connections we do have limits in terms of the number of calls you can make per second per minute. Those limits are enforced because you are running all of this on shared infrastructure, and we therefore have to make sure that we do not have a noisy neighbor problem, and every customer is being served in a fair manner, and therefore these limits need to be introduced. Next point. It's running within the same VNet, you get better performance and more control because it's all under the entire configuration is in your hands. And as I mentioned in the architecture, in case of managed connectors, you might experience more latency and less throughput because you are going to your application through multiple hops. In case you are using these connectors in VNet bound scenarios, then you are basically making calls into the internet and then going back to your VNet. So there are multiple hops, multiple calls required in case of managed connectors. And then finally, I think the final consideration would be the pricing, right? So depending on your workloads, managed connectors may still be a choice if you want to if you want to pay by consumption. But if you're using Logic App Standard, you are already paying for the compute, and in case of built-in connectors, you do not have to pay anything extra. So therefore, built-in connectors do make sense from pricing point of view as well in case of Logic App Standard, because you're not really paying additional on top of that compute. But if you do want to pay consumption-based pricing, then managed connectors would be your choice. In case of Logic App Standard, this decision becomes more important because managed connectors have been around for a while. We had managed connectors for a lot of services and applications, and where you need to use on-prem data gateway, and you can still do hybrid integrations. Those we are bringing in as built-in with Logic App Standard. And therefore, as a customer, you wonder that I see the same connector as managed and built-in, and which one should I choose? Which is why we wanted to cover this so that you can make an informed decision on what makes sense for your business and for your scenarios. This problem was not in consumption because you don't really have that choice, but in standard, at least today, you have the choice to choose managed or built-in for the same application. For example, for SFTP or SAP, you would have a choice to use either of these two connectors. Next slide, please. So the question comes, which one should you choose if you see the same connector available both as a built-in as a shared? So the recommendation would be to go with built-in because of all the benefits that I explained in the previous slide. But I also, to answer this question, I would actually like to respond by saying, how do we make decision on which connector we are going to develop as a built-in versus a managed? So here are some few considerations we take into mind. Applications or services that are hosted on-prem or in VNet, they are a natural choice to be built as a built-in connector. Likewise, for protocols or standards such as AS2 or Swift, these are also built as a built-in connector because these can be, all the processing happens within the engine. You do not have to reach out to internet or to any other outgoing service. Thirdly, if there are any data processing connectors such as XML validation, transformation, inline code, for all these, again, all the processing should happen within the engine, and therefore these are candidates for built-in connectors. And lastly, for workloads for scenario where a high throughput and low latency is required, those also become a candidate for built-in connectors for us. As an example, today we don't have IoT-based connectors, but as we invest into more connectors and as bring in IoT-based connectors to built-in, we would build them as built-in because it's a static traffic and it requires low latency. Today we have 20 plus connectors available as built-in connectors. That doesn't mean managed connectors should not be used. Whenever we have to connect to services that are hosted on the internet, that are third-party applications like Dropbox, Salesforce, Twitter, for all these and many others, managed connectors is a very valid choice. And so in future also, when we build connectors for such services, we will be building them as managed connectors. Today, we have 800 plus connectors here. So in terms of the choice, you definitely will find a lot of options, a lot of connectors as managed connectors for your application. And finally, next slide, please. And I want to close this with the roadmap for the built-in connectors. And again, I'm not going to go line by line into the items, but just wanted to give you an overview of the connectors we already have available as GA, connectors that are in public preview and will be in GA in the near future, as well as connectors that are under deployment and development from our side. So we are actively investing in this, and if you have any feedback, if you have any ask for a specific built-in connector, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter or any other on GitHub, where we are sharing this connectors roadmap to make any asks. And the reason we did this session today, just to cover on how these connectors are different, is that in future we will be we'll be doing more deeper dives on a lot of these built-in connectors. So we wanted to set the context on what is the value that built-in connectors bring to the table and why we are building certain connectors as built-in and not everything. So hopefully this was helpful. And yeah, with that, I'll hand over back to Alex and Wagner.
Yeah, thank you so much, Divya, for that last little insight into our connectors. So we have a little bit of extra time for some Q&A. I know there's a couple of starred comments already that we can chat about, but feel free to also continue putting your comments and questions into the chat. It looks like we have a question for Parth. Will there be support in the new VS Code designer to allow use of managed identity while developing in VS Code?
So while actually, I pinged Travis for this as well, but I don't think that we're sure about that yet, because it's like we don't know like what using managed identity, like in a local context is like. So we're trying to understand like more on that. So if you have any, further comments, do reach out to me. I'd be happy to work with you on this.
And on that note, although managed identity support might not be something that you bring in the near future, one of the things that we're doing, and that is part of the developer experience and the DevOps, is making sure that the tool is actually helping you to support like local versus portal experience without you having to manage all of that. So some work that we're planning for this next semester that's coming is, one, making sure that you don't have to worry about the refreshing of those tokens, right? When you're running locally, which is a big pain today for customers. The other one is making sure that the connections are parameterized in a way that you can use the raw connection locally, but when you're publishing, is easy to convert that to managed identity. Because the idea of that managed identity there on VS Code, from a development point of view, is mainly related to the connection between logic apps and the connectors, especially for managed connectors, right? But we can actually talk about that one on later, like maybe bring that topic and explain a little bit more of how that works next
Cool.
at the meetings.
That sounds good.
So I think the next one, Alex, is this one from Nikolai.
Yeah, all right. Nikolai is asking, what are the plans for consumption logic apps? Will they eventually be deprecated in favor of standard?
Anyone that wants to take that question can, but I think we all have the same answer. And from what I understand is no, we're not planning to deprecate consumption, right? So they are two very specific uses, right? You have like the schedule, the bursts that really sits well with consumption, where you have like the very places where you need the high throughput and things like that. That works really well with standard. So not seeing that being deprecated anytime soon is definitely not in our plans. Any other comments on that one?
I would agree.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, because I definitely see both of them having a place. And also the other thing that we're doing in improving on that, which brings out the export that we discussed last time, is now you have like a way to go from one to the other. So you can start in consumption, move to standard, and decide when your workflows are ready to migrate to a different model.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for that explanation.
Next question.
All right. Is there any work going on to improve performance of for each loop in standard logic apps?
From what I remember, and I think it's I was the one that working with that with Mary. We did something and it's being updated, right? So the runtime has some updates on that. We also have the blog post that explains those performance improvements. So what I'm gonna do is I'll just try to find that a blog post and post here on the questions while we're looking at the other questions. So okay, so actually we have like very official answer for plans to deprecate straight from Slava that is watching live. There we go. We don't have plans to deprecate consumption. And Nikolai is saying this like, yeah, that makes sense to have different workloads. And doesn't seem to have any other questions apart from that last one from Rahul. I'll find the link and post here, but in the meantime, I think it's time for us to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and keep an eye out for next month's community stand-up. Please let us know any feedback, and if you have any interest in other topics or different opportunities that you'd like to see next month.
Perfect.
Thank you.